Urban's a practice that focuses on infrastructure and design, and we're really looking at how we can transform how we plan and design infrastructure with the goal of building resilient cities and communities. So next slide, please. So we're based in San Francisco. We're a small company. Our services are primarily around design supervision, design, land use planning, and stakeholder engagement. Our primary clients are utility companies. I would say that's about 80% of our work. And then we do about 20% of our work with private clients. And that is primarily, the private clients are primarily more straight design work. I'm trained as an architect. And then we have a number of certifications and memberships that have that kind of helped us through as we move through this professional landscape. So next slide, please. So when I came to urban, I began to think about how should we be building infrastructure in a largely urbanized world. So I want you to think about the last time your cable went out, or the last time you experienced a planned outage, or you lost power, how you felt. Normally, we expect our infrastructure to kind of happen in the background, like it's invisible. And I think in many ways, for people of a certain age, we were lulled into that feeling that our infrastructure was just going to soldier on and be there for us. And I think that relationship where it's invisible, we only notice it when it breaks down. So urban's about kind of trying to change that relationship and look at how we can begin to think about infrastructure as something that we see in our daily lives. So our process is about looking at the program goals, like what does the project have to do, and setting a plan to achieve that, working with the community around stakeholder engagement, and then also aligning these goals with design excellence along engineering, other disciplines, but also architectural and urbanism. So next slide, please. So when you think about this, your project goals need, and your program needs to align with community sentiment. A community can derail your project, can stop a project, and this can have project delays, monetary delays, and it can also impact the company's brand and reputation. The next slide. So I'm going to talk about the work that one of my clients has done that I've done the last 10 years. This is the PG&E Hunters Point site. It's the site of a former power generation plant. San Francisco no longer has any generation in the city. All the power comes up from the south or across in a transmit cable. So PG&E has commissioned and remediated it to a residential standard. However, you still have a question of how do you still bring power to your service community? There still is an existing air insulated distribution and transmission substation on this site. And I've been working with PG&E on how to kind of unwind this site, return the land to the community, but also provide the infrastructure that they need to serve their community. So next slide, please. So as you see, there's an existing substation on a waterfront parcel. It's a 115 kV air insulated substation. The plan is, and actually this project's going into construction Q4 of this year, is to relocate that substation, or actually build a new substation, a gas insulated substation that will be housed inside a building. And once that is once that is energized, and the other substation can be decommissioned and remediated, dismantled, remediated, and that site will now be returned to productive use within the community. So next slide. So what I did with PG&E is that I put together the design team. I worked with their sourcing department to run an RFP, assemble a design team, and then have worked with the architecture team to come up with and the electric operations team to come up with a design that was going to fulfill the mission and then also be integrated into the community. So what you're seeing here is a diagram of the form of the building. We designed this building to be a net zero facility, meaning that all of the power that it uses is through systems that are embedded in the building, non-powered systems. So we're utilizing the prevailing wind and the Venturi effect to bring in wind on one side and have it exhaust through the top of the building. We're also putting solar panels on the building to provide other power to power some of the systems within the building. So the building is not conditioned, meaning there's no mechanical air conditioning except for in the battery room. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're trying to align this with community sentiment. One of the things we've been doing, we've had for the last 4 or 5 years, is a very extensive community process. You know, we want these buildings to give back to the community. One of the things we find is that in the past, these substations are kind of mute to the street. And when that happens, when there's no activity around a building, you tend to have activities that you don't really want. You know, people congregate in places where there's no oversight. So we weren't able to do this community engagement in person during COVID. So what we did is we took this all online, virtual like everyone else did. We did Zoom meetings, but we also created a digital survey and an email campaign where we had people go online and vote on the things that they wanted to see in a public plaza that we were building in front of the substation. And we found that this type of engagement we were able to get a different type of response, a richer response, because people were able to access the information at their own leisure. So next slide. So as I mentioned, the substation is actually just one piece of a larger strategy to unwind the infrastructural presence on the site and return it to productive use for the city and the neighborhood. So we've had a number of smaller projects, or actually not so small projects, that have been designed to change the perception of the site and prepare it for eventual reuse. So on the left, we have a program called Now Hunters Point. And this is a program where we temporarily program the site with activities tailored for the community. And these activities were meant to give us data to help us think about what the site could be in the future. Over the last year, it's primarily been a site for San Francisco and Rent Food Bank, and also the city of San Francisco has been doing COVID testing there. In 2017, we, along with the remediation department, restored the shoreline along the Hunters Point site, which is an asset to the community now. And then also in 2018, we worked with PG&E to create a vision document to kind of think of how the site could be redeveloped in the future. And actually, if you go to the San Francisco MoMA right now, there's an exhibition by the architect who was one of the key writers on this this project, and you'll see a model of the Hunters Point site, this site at SF MoMA. So next slide. So actually, I don't have a Q&A slide, so this is kind of where my Q&A would go.
Okay, great. Well, so Jonathan, thank you. And congratulations to your firm. And what I love was your projection of kind of the 3 legs of the stool, from the design elements to working with the client, and then of course, the community aspect. So to dig in a little bit, so knowing what I know of the project areas in the Bayview Hunters Point that you've been working on, it is probably the most challenging and intensive communities, because there is so much concern regarding the decommissioning and all the things that are going on. So, so that really was a challenging project, correct?
Yes. Well, one thing I would say is that, utilities used to be able to build and site their facilities really in the most, they're not, they have a special permitting relationship with cities where they can kind of place things where they want. But the way that's worked in the past is that a lot of infrastructure has been sited in areas of with less economic accessibility, and this has led to issues of economic injustice and environmental justice. We can't really do that anymore. People live everywhere, and also it's not appropriate to subject one segment of the population to all the brunt, to serve the rest of the city. So we need to, this is a very engaged community. And one of the things we're seeing is that they're very supportive of the work PG&E has done because of the work they did in the remediation. They really had a very, very kind of great relationship that was built during remediation, local hire program, project advisory committee. And now as we move into this next phase with the substation, they're interested in that new substation because they see it as a way for the site to eventually, to free up the site for eventual redevelopment.
Yeah. So there's, so I love that on the larger level, that's a whole entire project for a whole neighborhood, but couldn't your widget that you created there, couldn't that also be used for, let's say, a Comcast or a T-Mobile that was doing retail rollout, retail construction? Couldn't you also use that widget on those type of projects?
I think so. My feeling is like when you show up in a community, you really need to think about, how you're showing up, not just from a marketing point of view, but what is it bringing to the city? Like, what are they seeing of your company? This is what they're going to take away. So my expertise has been around kind of pulling together these teams and then overseeing the teams and kind of act, like one of my colleagues, although in a very, Deb was mentioning that she kind of plays both sides of the fence, offense and defense. And I do a similar but different type of jujitsu where I'm really kind of, I'm acting as the voice of the design, the design voice. I'm also trying to make sure the designer meets the goal of the project, but also I'm aware of the what the community wants.
Great. So, and I noticed Joe Chow from, of course, Joe is an absolutely amazing person within SoCal Gas, highly respected, great connections, great advocate for minority women, disabled veteran and LGBT businesses. He actually, of course, want to make sure that we have your contact information. But Jonathan, you did highlight PG&E, but you literally could take this show, and you probably have taken the show on the road to utilities throughout California.
Yes, I mean, I've actually, I would say that prior to the pandemic, I was kind of on the verge of taking this. The goal was to bring this, to move out of San Francisco, have it move nationally, and also this type of work can be applied to, nationally. And then on an international scale, it depends on where you are. The relationship of infrastructure it changes within a kind of a mature economy versus an emerging economy. So the needs are quite different. But that is the goal, is to kind of take this idea is that like the interface between infrastructure and where we live is becoming thinner and thinner. And we need to kind of recognize that and kind of design it so we are kind of living amongst it in a way, in a safe way.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so I want to give you kind of a time to make sure that we kind of do your wrap up slide.
Sure.
But I love that your project management, your team building, your stakeholder engagement, and the way that you work with, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 stakeholders to the utilities. That's so brilliant. So Dominic, can we go to the next slide, or do we have a next?
This is my this is my thank you slide. It has my my contact information. I do want to thank you, Paul, and everyone at BuildOUT so far, and my colleagues at PG&E, Public Affairs and Electric Operations and Supplier Diversity. I've also had some, I have kind of existing relationships with a number of architectural firms in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, Mexico City, New York. So this work has really kind of enabled me to work with a lot of really great people. What I'd like to do in the future is one of the things that I've identified that urb-in does is that we're kind of we're a small player. We've had a fair amount of influence within the Bay Area. The number of I've done every substation that PG&E has built over the last 10 years. So there's a number. So the imprint is there. However, the industry is dominated by these large A&E architecture and engineering firms. I don't really compete at their level, but what I'd like to do is partner with them. Yeah, because I think that there's a way to work together, and then also I'd love to talk with the large investor-owned utilities and the small community-based utilities and water districts about how I can bring my services to them. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.